Hello and welcome to an overview of lightweight alternatives to the Caballero. I saw some interesting models mentioned in the comments, and of course I also did some research before I bought the Caballero, and I decided to summarize the results in this clip. And to give it some extra value, we will fly to the production plant of each manufacturer. I did it by using Google Earth, which was a pain in the ass. I gathered only a few specifications of all those models mentioned in this clip: its weight, power, and fuel capacity. There might be some deviations in those specifications. If you are really interested in one of those models, of course you have to check back which specifications are true for the specific model, because there are differences depending on model year and so on. Weight is always the value with a full fuel tank. We'll start with the Fantic models that I think are quite interesting. It's not only the Caballero, it's also the XEF Rally, which has a big fuel tank, low weight, and high price. Really not cheap. I guess it's at least twice the price of the Caballero, but yeah, it's the more serious adventure bike. Honestly, I didn't like the look of those rally bikes with that high tower, but today I could agree with it. Big disadvantage of this bike is that you can't drive it street legal with full power, at least on the German market. Legal power is less than 20 horsepowers, which is a shame. The next brand is located in Portugal. Small brand, not well known in my opinion. Some might call it exotic, but some might also call the Caballero exotic. But in my opinion, if you don't have to mill your spare parts on your own, it's not exotic enough. But there is a real exotic brand in the end of this clip. So we are talking about AJP, and the model is called PR7. The bike is mostly developed and produced in Portugal, but the engine is bought from Asian suppliers. It looks a little bit like the XEF Rally from Fantic, but it's heavier and it has a smaller fuel tank, but it is also much cheaper. I guess it's like 5,000 euros cheaper, and it has the higher street legal power. The next one is a brand located next to me, and it's hard to say that, but the brand is known for a few of the ugliest motorcycles. We are talking about BMW, and honestly, they are getting better since a few years. Some of the models look really good, and the engines are also quite nice. There was a model in the past, the G450X, which is also not very sexy, but at least on paper it looks quite capable of doing off-road. And although I'm not a big fan of the big GS models, the 450 GS during the concept phase looked great. But now we can see what it looks like in the series. A few official pictures are published, and I'm not sure how to call it in a polite way. I guess it's, let's say disappointing. And the problem with all these A2 models, the weight is much too high. Price is definitely interesting. I read that it should be about 8,000 euros for the fully equipped machine, but keep in mind it will come from India. Annoying topic, but good opportunity to switch to the Asian brands, and we'll start with Triumph. Sorry to the guys from UK for this bad joke. I really like Triumph for the style, the design of the bikes, and also the quality, to be honest. I rode a Bobber 1200 heavy bike, perfect quality, but also very expensive for a bike that is coming from Thailand. The headquarters is still in England, and some of the Highline bikes are still produced in England, but I guess it's like 99% of all the bikes or more that are produced in Thailand. In comparison to the Caballero, it's probably only the 400X model, which is interesting. But again, it's a bit too heavy in my opinion. Same issue with all the A2 models. Let's come to the Japanese manufacturers We'll start with Kawasaki. To be honest, I didn't hear much of Kawasaki during the last 10 years. When I heard it, only bikes from driving schools came up to my mind. But of course, they had some very interesting models in the past. Problem was always that you can't drive them with the full power street legal, at least in Germany. And the upcoming models, like the KLE 500, yeah, they had a weight of more than 200 kilos in the past, and probably they will have the same weight in 26. Yeah, let's see, maybe they have a surprise for us. Yeah, after Kawasaki, let's come to the biggest manufacturer of engines worldwide. Means we are still in Japan, and we are talking about Honda. Honda has at least two interesting models, the CRF 300L and the Rally model. Both look capable of doing off-road, and I would definitely trust in the reliability. So if I had to do a world trip, I would probably prefer the Honda instead of the Caballero, but that would be a quite slow trip because the engine power is not too great. And in my opinion, that is probably the reason why those bikes are very often sold with low mileage. I guess that most owners recognize during the first days, oh, that is very low power. And if you are not only driving off-road, but more than 80 or 90% on-road, which is probably the case of most motorcycle drivers, then it's probably just not enough power to have fun on the road. Yeah, give it 10 extra horsepowers and a maybe 15 liters fuel tank, and it would probably be my choice. Yeah, let's switch to Yamaha. They don't have many interesting models that could be compared with the Caballero. And I think this could be due to the fact that they already have the Tenere, which is a very good selling model. And maybe that's enough for them, I don't know. And by the way, that is also the reason why I don't have the Tenere in this list. It's just too heavy, more than 200 kilograms. That is also the reason why the Aprilia Touareg is not in the list, which is slightly scratching the 200 kilograms, but that is definitely still much too much for off-road driving in my opinion. And it's simply no comparison to the Caballero, which weighs like 40 or 50 kilos less. Yeah, back to Yamaha and the three models that I would call quite interesting. It's the WR450F, the XT660R, and the Trigger. The Trigger, of course, is not an enduro model, it's more trial, but I think it could be quite funny. Very light, only 120 kilos. The WR has the same issue as most of the motocross bikes. You can't drive it with the full power street legal, and the XT is just too heavy. Yeah, let's come to the last Japanese competitor, Suzuki. They had a big comeback this year, which I really appreciated, because I had the old model, the DRZ 400S, or let's say SM because it was a supermoto bike, and I was really looking forward to the new models, the DR4S and SM, and to be honest, I was just surprised and disappointed by the price. Not sure why they think that they can take 10,000 euros for those models. But yeah, if you have the money, buy that bike because that is definitely reliable and probably also stable in the price. Not sure how they do that at Suzuki. It's the same with their cars. The prices are really perverted, and that is caused by the Suzuki politics. They always stop selling their bikes and cars in Europe, and then you don't have enough of them on the market, and the prices are rising to a level which I can't accept. So normally it doesn't make sense to buy the old model at the current prices. Yeah, that's it for Japan. We are now returning to Europe, to the former superpower. That means we are talking about KTM. The current situation is not so nice, but of course they had and they still have very proper off-road bikes. And you can think of KTM what you want. What they did during the last 15 years is really impressive. The one-cylinder bikes with that amount of power lightweight, quite reliable, and a normal price in the beginning. Today it's more than 10,000 euros, but it's still okay. They earn it. And sorry for the laughter regarding reliability. My first bike was a KTM 620 SC super competition, and I killed it during 2 or 3 days, which was caused by my stupidity and the very low oil volume. I guess it was only 1.2 liters of oil in the engine. And I brought it to my dealer and he said, yeah, man, you can only give it full throttle as long as you can hold your breath. Compared to that, today's KTM models are really reliable. But yeah, to be honest, those are street models for the normal customers. If you are buying off-road models, of course, you still have to take care. Yeah, to the Caballero alternatives, definitely all typical 690 models, whatever they call it, Husqvarna, Gas, and so on, doesn't matter. I also thought about adding the 390 Adventure to the list, but no, that bike is definitely too boring. A bike which is not too popular is the Husqvarna 701 Long Range. It has a decent 25 liters tank, giving you an enormous range, which I really like. But there is also another way to get some extra range. You can install the Rade Garage fuel tank. It gives you 6 extra liters. The air filter has to be adjusted, and in the end you don't see that extra fuel tank from the outside. But at least in Germany it's quite complicated to get it legal because of that adjusted air filter, which they don't like. I guess in the UK it should be no problem. Yeah, we are now going back to Italy, to a very small brand, which is still not the most exotic in this list. It's Beta, or Beta, I don't know. They have the Alp 4.0, but in the end it's not flash and it's not fish. 150 kilos is not very light. It doesn't have much power, and the fuel capacity is also not enormous with 11 liters. In my opinion, it looks like a cheap mountain bike, and therefore the 6,000 euros are not very cheap, since the engine and probably further components are also coming from Asia. But anyway, nice alternative to the Caballero. If you can get it cheap, why not? And now we are coming back to my British friends, because it's time for the real exotic brand. Honestly, I didn't know it until last year, and that was probably too late because they are already bankrupt. I am talking about CCM in Bolton, and they had some really lightweight bikes. The most interesting bike in comparison to the Caballero is probably the GP 450 Adventure. They assembled a BMW engine, as far as I know. That means you can get some spare parts for that bike, and probably you will always be able to fix it somehow, but don't expect to find some dealer who can support you. Yeah, definitely a shame that such brands can't survive against the competitors. So let's come to the last brand, which won't become bankrupt as long it belongs to VW. Means we are back in Italy, and we are talking about Ducati, which didn't have any popular off-road bikes in the last 20 years or so. But since 2024, they are launching some very interesting models, including the first one-cylinder supermoto, the Hypermotard 698, which I really like. But even better is probably the 450 Enduro, which comes street legal next year. Yeah, I like big fuel tanks, I like reliability, I like low prices, but in this case, I just need to have it. Very sexy, Italian. Yeah, that won't be a decent decision. That is just a decision by my heart, if I can afford it, and if not, the bank has to. Worst thing about it is that I will never be able to ride it as it deserves it, but who cares? Yeah, we are coming to an end. I hope that you saw some interesting models, and if not, sorry for that. I entered most of those models into a table, and if you see some faults, sorry for that. As mentioned in the beginning, if a model is really interesting for you, check back if those specifications are correct. And I would really appreciate reading some interesting models in the comments. Nearly forgot to mention that I like most of the mentioned bikes, although I criticized them. That means have fun with your bike, safe ride, and enjoy the November Take care.